Go over the steps of light-dependent reactions. I want you to understand the inputs and outputs of light-dependent reactions, and you should be able to label a light reactions diagram. There are two phases of photosynthesis. We call one light-dependent. This is where light energy is absorbed and converted into chemical energy. The two types of chemical energy are ATP and NADPH. In this light-dependent phase, oxygen is produced. It's not the main thing that's produced for photosynthesis to occur, but it is what's called a byproduct. And so what that means is it's something that's produced just by the off chance, which happens to be very valuable to us as we breathe that oxygen. The second phase is light independent, also known as the Calvin cycle. This is where CO2, ATP, and NADPH come into the reaction, and they're used to make glucose. And glucose is that basic building block for more complex sugars such as starch and other polysaccharides. So again, the two stages of photosynthesis. In the yellow here, we have the light dependent reactions, and in the gray here, we have the light independent reactions, also known as the Calvin cycle. Light independent reactions used to be known as dark reactions because they do not require light, but they can still happen during the day, so we don't really refer to them as dark reactions anymore. So again, this is also just showing the two reactions. So right here on the yellow, we have the light reactions, and then again in the gray, we have the Calvin cycle or light independent reactions. So you should know at this point the equation for photosynthesis. We're going to talk about where light dependent reactions take place and independent, and what are the inputs of the light dependent reactions and the outputs. So going back to this drawing right here, you'll notice that the light reactions occur right here, which is called the thylakoid membrane. And the light independent reactions, also known as the Calvin cycle, occur in the stroma, which is the space between the thylakoid membrane. The third bullet here, what are the inputs of the light dependent reaction? What are the outputs? So if we look at here what the inputs are, the things that go into the reaction or equation. And the outputs are the things that go out of the equation or reaction. There are two parts of the light dependent. So remember, photosynthesis has two phases, light dependent, light independent. We are just talking about the first phase, the light dependent. And that's broken down into two parts, one called photolysis, and the second is electron transport chain. All right, so step one in photolysis, the light energy reaches the thylakoid, which excites electrons and causing the water molecule to split up. So again, here we have our light, and here we have our water molecule, and it causes it to split, which releases these oxygen. That's that byproduct. And it also produces two hydrogen ions and also two electrons in that process of the splitting. So H plus is released, it stays in the thylakoid space. The electron is also released, but it enters something known as the transport system, which we'll talk about. And again, oxygen is given off as that byproduct. It goes out of the cell, or the plant breathes it out, and that's what we breathe in. So step 2, the excited electrons move through the thylakoid membrane in what is known as the electron transport chain. And as they move through, so these electrons are kind of moving through, you can see them right here. They go in and out of protein pumps. And every time they're going in and out of these protein pumps, ATP and NADPH are produced. So here we have this produced NADPH. Here we have ATP being produced. And so those things are made, which are really important later on. So the inputs of the light-dependent reaction are light and water, and the outputs are NADPH and ATP. These two will be used later. And then we also have this O2, which is a byproduct and released out. So what goes into the light-dependent reaction? Think of what are the inputs. What is the goal of the light-dependent reaction? What is being produced that's going to be used later on? And then what is given off as that byproduct? Our next section, we're going to review light-dependent reactions, and then we're going to also introduce light-independent reactions by completing a Calvin cycle. So light-independent reactions used to be known as dark reactions. We don't call them those anymore because while no light is needed, it can happen in dark or in light, and they used to be called dark reactions because they can happen in the dark, but it's a little deceiving to call them dark reactions because they can also happen in the light, in the presence of light. But light is not required. And really there's only one step, and we refer to that as the Calvin cycle. So often the light independent reaction is just simply known as the Calvin cycle. So this is the second phase of photosynthesis.